All right. What's happening, fam? L.A.R. movement still moving. Book is entitled Lessons from a Non-Custodial Father at Amazon, Kindle, and Create Space. A link will be in the description box below, as usual. This video is entitled The Black Male Sex Symbol Enigma. So, me and my best friend were on the phone, and we were talking about in some ways the gender war. Like me and her were talking about that, and I'm gonna do another video on that part of it. And then that conversation spawned into, well, what's an attractive black man to women? What's an attractive sex symbol? Because I was like, when it comes to us, our people, we have the widest variety of what we consider sex symbols, right? I said, but at the same time, we ignore a lot of people that would be sex symbols to somebody else. And she's like, what do you mean? I said, okay. I can legitimately say at this particular point, LL Cool J and Denzel Washington have been sex symbols since the 80s. So I was like, and I named a few other guys. But I was like, how can you name a white or Hispanic or Asian Muslim person who was considered a sex symbol from the 80s to now? And she's like, Tom Cruise. I was like, and she's like, nah, nobody sees Tom Cruise as a sex symbol anymore. I'm like, okay. And then she was like, well, she's looking. I said, I'll give you one, but I don't, but he wasn't a sex symbol in the 80s. She's like, who? I said, Brad Pitt. He wasn't a sex symbol in the 80s. He was a struggling actor, or he wasn't really famous enough to be considered a sex symbol yet. She's like, yeah, Brad Pitt is a sex symbol. I said, but see, Brad Pitt wouldn't be a sex symbol if Brad Pitt was black. And she's like, what you mean? My answer was simple. I was like, Brad Pitt's short and small. Black women wouldn't consider a guy who's like Brad Pitt, a black version of Brad Pitt, as sexy. So it confuses us, right? She paused. She was like, yeah, that is kind of true, because we don't see, everybody has their different tastes. And I'm like, we all have different tastes. That's why I use LL Cool J and Denzel Washington. You got a big, swole guy, and I guess an average guy, like, as far as build and height, right? But they've both been sex symbols since the 80s. So now you got that issue, like, is it the build, is it the guy? And she was like, it's just something about Denzel. I'm like, all right, I'm not hating, I'm just saying for us guys, it's different, right? It's like, we don't get it. And what plays into it is the up and down from the 80s to 90s to 2000s to now to 2010s, the type of guys that I can say were considered sex symbols and have been considered sex symbols from the 90s to 2000s to the 2010s. And why it confuses guys. And then, so I said, think about it. I could tell you another sex symbol that confuses the hell out of guys, that defies all logic for black women. She's like, who? I said, Prince. Short, light-skinned dude with a perm, wearing girls' clothes. Game blouses. He was a sex symbol. Women just love Prince. You can't get mad at Prince, right? But I was like, see, it's crazy. And then we went to the 90s, and she brought up Tupac. And she's like, I really didn't like Pac. I said, see? That's the thing. You didn't like Pac. You didn't think Pac was that attractive. I said, but see, here's the problem. Well, now women love Tupac, right? or think he was attractive. He was the basis for all this stuff. You know, this multi-faceted thug, right? And she was like, well, wasn't my cup of tea. I said, that's fine. I said, but think about it. That was the 90s. I said, now we get to the 2000s. I said, you know, you can say from the 90s up, Shamar Moore, Morris Chestnut was a sex symbol. Morris Chestnut might have been a sex symbol in the 80s too, because I forget when Boys in the Hood came out. But that's the issue, right? And she's like, okay, well, those two would definitely looked at as sex symbols. I was like, you know, in the meantime, between time, there was a time when Wesley Snipes was a sex symbol. She's like, yeah, okay. Now, I'm going somewhere because I'm even getting into athletics in a minute. So when it came to her, and we could give her, and she came up with 4 non-black men, and I had to help her. The one she did say was John Stamos from Full House, because she always had a crush on John Stamos. So I was like, okay. So she had John Stamos. I gave her Brad Pitt and George Clooney. And I gave her Mario Lopez, because she was like, she couldn't think of his name. So I was like, okay, Mario Lopez. Been considered a sex symbol forever and a day. For about 20 years now. I said, but here's the irony about that. I guess George Clooney would be like in that Denzel category. Brad Pitt, too short, too small. John Stamos, nobody would consider a sex symbol now. But that's neither here nor there. The reason why I'm saying it's an enigma, because we fast forwarded to the present, and I started saying all kinds of wild stuff just to have fun with this, right? So I'm like, so I live in Texas. So I said, think about this. If you ask most black women in Houston, and probably a lot of black women who watch sports, they have a massive crush on J.J. Watt. And she was like, yeah, that motherfucker is sexy. I said, uh-huh. J.J. Watt is a fine white boy, right? And she was like, yeah, he is. I said, now the problem with that is, J.J. Watt is in the NFL. And there are about 10 guys on every team that's black, that's built the exact same way, that would, in all, for all intent purposes, would be, quote unquote, just as handsome as J.J. Watt, but they're black. And since there's so many of us walking around like that, people just don't look at guys as attractive. We don't stand out because we have so many quote unquote sex symbols. But the problem that I'm saying is the range is so far that women get picky just like men get picky. And she's like, what do you mean? I said, think about it. Y'all women messed yourselves up with some of the guys y'all liked over the years. She's like, what you mean? I says, well, think about this. I'm about to use hip hop as an example real quick. I said, now, women said Lil Wayne was attractive. Lauren London had a baby by Lil Wayne and Nipsey Hussle. But women said Lil Wayne was attractive at the time. Women said Rick Ross was attractive at the time. And then she laughed. She's like, "We did say that stupid shit." She might not have said it, but she knew it was around. I said, but here's the irony, though. You know who isn't really considered a sex symbol? He had a short run when he first came out, and now people ain't feeling him. And people haven't been feeling him for a long time. And I had a laugh because he has a comedy thing with Lance Gross about marry, smash, or kill, and he keeps getting killed. 50 Cent. And she's like, I ain't really like 50. I said, see, here's the problem, though. If you, for all intent purposes, 50 Cent is really the personification of all of this corporate thug stuff women have been talking about they've been wanting for the last 20-something years. 50 Cent is the real life ghost. You know, rich, muscular, in shape, when he get in shape. Powerful. People fear him. you see how he looks in street clothes and he switches it up and he wears suits. You know, he can get down and dirty, and he can go into corporate America and get that business handle. But people don't think of him as attractive. And I said, that's odd to me. Very odd. She's like, why? Because when sisters say what they want and you got people that fit the mold, they don't say these guys are attractive. And she was thinking about it like, when you say, I want a guy who's a certain body, a huge guy, I was like, well, women didn't consider Dwight Howard a sex symbol because they said he was goofy. And the reason I bring this up is because a lot of ladies dismiss men if they date women of other races, not thinking about all of the guys who are considered sex symbols that every sister would love to date, but all of the guys you overlook along the process. And it gets interesting because I was like, y'all like Usher and y'all like Mike Vick. Y'all thought they were sexy. She's like, yeah. I said, I still don't see the Usher thing and the Mike Vick thing. I'm a guy, so, but I'm just bringing the guys I remember sisters going crazy about. But I laughed. I said, you know what, though? That's the difference between men and women, because if we find out if we find out a girl burning, they're not sexy to us no more. I don't care how fine they were supposed to be. I'm just saying. If she burning, not so much. We ain't messing with her no more. It's like, see, y'all hypocrites. So, it's an enigma. Big enigma. Because I was talking to her about, I said, think about the Michael Vick thing. You know, when it comes to body style, people thought Allen Iverson, women loved Allen Iverson. But at the same time, women will say somebody like Allen Iverson is too skinny. You know, people loved, but you want a big, strong, fast, masculine man. But I remember nobody looked at Megatron as handsome when he played, right? And I thought about this even with the NBA. How many guys in the NBA over the years weren't considered sex symbols? But you want tall, dark, and handsome. You know, Kobe wasn't a sex symbol. People make fun of LeBron. The only person I could think of that women would go crazy for was D Wade. Out of the whole NBA, I can't think of nobody else that women just was, oh, I like that D Wade. That's it. Not Chris Paul. Definitely not Kevin Durant. Not LeBron. Nope, not LeBron. They got mad at Kyrie for being on the boat with white chicks, but he wasn't considered a sex symbol by the ladies. No way. I mean, it's an issue. You know, and my aunts used to tell me about, like, back in the day, Muhammad Ali was a sex symbol. Because he used to tell you he was pretty, though. And then that's how everybody felt. Man, he pretty. But when it came to men, it's just like, it goes crazy. Like, I remember women was feeling Gerald Levert. But, so for all the chubby sweater wearers out there, they're still coming up off Gerald Levert swagger. Can't be mad at you. I know where you get it from, right? Right now the guy is probably Omari Hardwick. But in real life, I think Omari Hardwick's like 5'8", 5'9". Women wouldn't necessarily see him as attractive because they would say he's too short. But, like Lil Wayne. But I was like, here's a funny thing. Kevin Hart isn't a sex symbol, but if Kevin Hart was white, probably be equivalent to Brad Pitt, so that'll make him a sex symbol. So you see what I'm saying? It's crazy because Tom Cruise ain't that tall. He was a sex symbol. And like I said, Brad Pitt is not that tall, and he's a sex symbol. So And a lot of people like Robert Downey Jr., I don't think they're the biggest guys. I'm not a big guy, so I'm just talking about this in this way. I mean, how many NFL running backs and receivers were considered sex symbols? Linebackers, safeties, defensive ends, tight ends. You know what I'm saying? And it's just when people saw them on TV. How many basketball players sex symbols? Well, I think Larry Fitzgerald was the closest thing, right? You know, anybody consider Russell Wilson a sex symbol? Hell no. You know, Cam Newton would have been there, but he dressed crazy than a motherfucker. So, well, fellas, you got guys out here trying to be everything under the sun to get these women attention because we're confused as hell about what's sexy to black women because you can literally go from Prince to J.J. Watt. We don't know what the fuck going on. Just my opinion. We just don't know. All right.